Okay, let's fast forward a little bit to the 1980s. You were a permanent member, I would say a founding member of the Progressive Alliance of Liberia, and it was sometime in the 70s that the PAL transplanted itself on the shores of Liberia from the US of A. And of course you were very, very active. Now, there were certain developments that occurred which were very crucial and critical looking back at hindsight. One was of course the, what you call, you said you disagree, you won't call it rice riots, you call it the
Rice Massacre.
The Rice Massacre. And then, that's one. Then we had, of course, the coup which came in the subsequent year, from 79 then 1980. Now, there was a time in early 1980 when the late Gabriel Bacchus Matthews, peace be to his memory, led a midnight march on the Executive Mansion. Now, there were claims that there was a right-wing coup in the making, and Mr. Matthews had gone to the mansion at midnight in an effort to thwart what would have been a coup. What is your recollection of those developments? Were you in the country at the time? And if you were, what are your recollections?
March 1980, I was here.
If you were, what are your recollections of that particular incident?
I didn't participate in that, what we now call the midnight march. I didn't participate in it. But after the event, I talked with Mr. Matthews, and Mr. Matthews said that that night there was a plan to topple the government, and his way of obstructing that plan was to move people in the yard of the mansion. And I think it worked, because that particular night, whatever he thought was about to happen did not happen. So we assume that his intervention saved the day.
But why were you not involved?
Sir?
Why were you not involved, being such a principal figure in the movement?
Well, as I said, when I returned to Liberia, 79, I came on an invitation of Mr. Tolbert. And my activities at that time were not to engage in overt demonstrations and all of that. My intention was to see what was happening, why it was happening, and to understand what was going on. So not being involved with that particular incident, I was not even asked to be part of it, and I really didn't want to be part of it anyway. If I were asked, if I were asked to participate, I would not have been a demonstrator. I would have been someone who wants to record history. Because as I said, I had a camera, and I was trying to capture as much as possible with the intention that if I ever go back to the States, I would call my colleagues and show them what was happening. Anyway, that midnight demonstration, as it's called, took place. But interestingly, when people demonstrate at night, that's reason for the government to get concerned. Did Mr. Tolbert get concerned about this midnight demonstration? The security system. It's a hindsight now.
Yes, but I think they did.
Okay.
Evidenced by the mass arrest. Were you not arrested?
No, I was not arrested. I was arrested later on down the line, but not 1980.
Yes, but the government reacted, and there was a mass arrest of the PAL leadership and others.
No, they didn't go that way. After the march, the midnight march, there were no arrests. However,
the subsequent call for the resignation of the government,
that was when the arrest came. After the midnight march, there was a meeting at the PAL office on Newport Street, and at that meeting, a call was made for the government, for Mr. Tolbert to resign. It is that call that precipitated the arrest.
The arrest. Yeah. And that's when you were also...
No, I was not arrested.
Okay, but just looking back on reflection, did you have any indications from whatever source there may be, and again, the source may not be important, but did you have any indications that indeed there were elements of the True Whig Party, of the ruling party, the government of the day, to unseat President Tolbert?
I wasn't looking for those kinds of signals. Again, one may say that we were the activists of the day, but perhaps naive as to what our activism could provoke. One may say that. But I remember a conversation I had with Joseph J.F. Chesson at ELBC. He had gone to participate in a television talk show. And at that time, I was doing some production work. And Mr. Chesson, just before going on the show, had this conversation where he threatened to string all of the power leadership on the electric wire. Again, we're talking, and it didn't occur to me the seriousness of these kind of commentaries until after the coup. We just laughed about it, that this man said that if you guys continue to play, we'll string all of you guys up on the electric wire and whip your butt. It was a passive comment. There was no thought about coup and all this kind of thing. And we just, anyway, but looking back now, if you talk about palace coup concept and all of that, my whole mind was never in that direction until the coup happened on the morning of April 12.
But from what Mr. Matthews has said about this right-wing coup, was he not able to divulge any further details on what may have been, this right-wing coup? Now, our attempt is to explore history, seek out the facts, and put things in proper perspective. For quite a long period, there were a lot of conceptions that what you refer to as quote-unquote progressives were responsible for the coup. Our work also suggests that, and from what is available, if you read Mrs. Tolbert's book, for instance, she says in her book that the president did not have any friends. And she's saying to him, you don't have any friends anymore. They come here to the mansion, and right in this mansion, behind you, they say the worst things about you. And possibly so, may have been contemplating that Mr. Tolbert appeared to have been in some kind of alliance with the progressives, represented by the PPP, and that he was taking the country down the wrong road. And for a number of reasons, it was necessary to bring that into check. So that was 1980. Today is 2008. Almost 30 years following. Since then, have you not been able to, whether by casual conversation or by direct information, gather anything that would establish, yes, there may have been a coup in the making, as Mr. Matthews has said, which he foiled, claimed to have foiled by that midnight demonstration?
Well, if we were to engage in, I've done a lot of analysis on why and how things happen here, and the little I've been able to piece together so far suggests that it was the intransigence of the True Whig Party that provoked the coup. Intransigence mixed with certain type of responses that led to the April 12 incident. Don't forget, and again, this is a pure analysis. One can put the pieces together. When Tubman died and Mr. Tolbert took over, there was an attempt on the part of Mr. Tolbert to liberalize the system. to relax the situation, give the young people a chance, especially university activists, give them a chance, let them speak out their minds. And this kind of release of the strings is like letting the genie out of the bottle. The young people became more vocal, more questions were raised, questions which the regime could not answer. Why is this? Why is that? Why not this? The regime could not respond to those kinds of questions, those kinds of queries. Instead, the regime tried to tighten up the security system on the one hand. So it's like Mr. Tolbert was playing with fire at the same time, allowing liberal tendencies to obtain, at the same time strengthening the powers that be. There was the training of this special unit in the military called the Green Beret or something. Okay.
Strike force.
The strike force. And this strike force was provided uniform. And I remember when I came from abroad, I saw the patch on the shoulder of members of the strike force. And what I saw on the patch was a native man with a cutlass in his hand running behind, I believe it was someone that had a suit. That was on the patch. What's the message of that patch? You know, if you look back now, they had a native man, you know, with a cutlass, and he was running behind somebody, and I think the person he was running behind was in a suit. I saw Mr. Tolbert Jr. Drawing cartoons of people putting a rope around capitalism, all these high-rise structures. This is a cartoon drawing that Mr. Tolbert Jr. in the legislature then was circulating in Monrovia, dragging capitalism into the land of socialism, where there were one-armed men and one-eyed people and suffering people. All these are messages. I also heard Mr. Tolbert saying that Bago Matthew said he will bring rice for $9, and they want to bind the houses of the people, they want to take their houses. And I remember also Matthew responding to those kinds of verbal articulation, that you are making a promise, Mr. Tolbert, to the people. If you continue to make that promise and the people develop an expectation, we might have no choice but to deliver on the promise you are making. These are coded messages, meaning, well, Mr. Tolbert said that the people intended to burn their houses and to bring rice for $9 and to throw everybody out of government, and Matthew warning that be careful your rhetorics. At that time, I think he had a program on the radio, and I mean, it was like every week these messages were coming out. By doing that, I don't think Mr. Tolbert realized that he was actually preparing the psychic of the people, trying to demonize Matthew and put him in the corner. Matthew too, being astute, I guess, activist, responded that what you're doing there, you're making promises. And those promises may very well come true if you continue to do that. You know, so all of these kinds of behavior pattern, one would suggest we're setting the stage. Who was it that staged the coup? The strike force. So why, you know, the way we respond to certain things, if you're not smart, you create a problem for yourself. You have to be circumspect. You have to know how to respond to these kind of agitations. But to answer your question directly, the question of whether people in the Tolbert regime were planning to overthrow Mr. Tolbert, I never talked to anyone, neither did I ever develop the suspicion, except that at hindsight, when you begin to analyze things that happen here, then you can say, oh, I see. This is what was actually happening, all of that. They passed this sedition bill. I remember one of the bills we opposed in those days to criticize, and then there was something about rampant corruption, all this kind of thing. In the end, these were the charges that were put on the former government officials. Okay, so whether people were planning to do a palace school, even to do a non-palace school, there was no thought about that at all. It was a complete shock. This is why when Matthew tells us that, look, this place is too fragile, let's not push any further. We all took note of that. And from that time, UPP has never been the kind of aggressive, agitating party as it was in the old days. And later on we were called apologetic politicians. Then we came up with this loyal opposition, stability, calm. You hear me today talking about let us be calm. Because I've seen the consequence of people getting excited. I have no intention now of talking in such a way to excite people, especially when I know the consequence. I must speak calmly now. Will anybody listen? And the problems are still around, don't get me wrong. But the way to deal with them is not to ring the bell so loud that people jump in the street and start throwing stones. If people get angry in this town, I would be one of those that would be saying, calm down, we'll deal with it.